Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7, following on with my Japanese car culture week. And today is all going to be themed around the quirky little Japanese cars known as K cars. Now these are insanely cool little Japanese cars, ones which we have nearly 70 of in Gran Turismo game history, and they are absolutely incredible. I'm going to be talking about what happens if K cars went wild overnight, talking about the Daihatsu RJ or racing jacket. Now you can pick this thing up for a whopping 1 million credits. It's got the typical 660cc displacement, it's FF or front wheel drive, 146 brake horsepower, absolutely smashing the rest of the standard K cars. As you can see, in terms of its weight, it's 600 kilograms and turbocharged, so this makes it a mighty little beast. However, there is a few quirks to it. Now this is a normal kind of, I guess, race car. It actually has no upgrades, meaning that it's only eligible for the Nordschleife Hot Lap, meaning that I can't go ahead and upgrade it for the high speed ring. But what are the quirks of this car? Well, it's actually the slowest VGT in history. It's just absolutely terrible. In fact, it was just kind of almost shoved in GT Sport. There was no trailer, it just kind of appeared. You went on the game one day and boom, oh look, Daihatsu Copen RJ, the racing jacket version. But it's a bit more interesting than that, okay? I could certainly just say this is, look, it's a terrible VGT, it's absolutely pointless, but it is certainly a very quirky car. Now, the whole concept of the Daihatsu Copen VGT is to essentially take what would happen if those little tiny K cars went absolutely rabid overnight and decided to be absolutely mental. And yeah, well, it kind of exceeds in doing that. It really is a fun little car. Now, in terms of performance, it runs on sports hards. Again, if you want to put racing tires on it and all that stuff, you can do, but there's no performance upgrades to it. And I would just say that it's not really worth it. And 1 million credits is rather on the expensive side, but just in terms of being a weird, quirky little K car, then it exceeds my expectations. It does exactly what I want it to do. Take these small little slow cars, essentially shove a bunch of aero on them, put it in a race kind of looking form and just go crazy. Now, a funny little side note is this is based on the more modern Copen. Now, we do actually have one of the Copens in the game, and that is actually the older model that I kind of call the Ladybird looking car, or Ladybug, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, this one kind of gets a more, I guess, sort of modern, sleek look, more akin to something like the S660. Obviously the 660 being the typical output of these cars and the typical weight of 600 kilograms or so. And yeah, it is a very, very awesome little car. We don't actually have the base model in the game though, but you know, it kind of just is what it is. I can kind of make do because this little thing would essentially exceed all of what the original model could give us anyway, although it would be kind of nice to have some more up-to-date K cars. You know, I get they're more advanced, they've kind of lost a bit of that sort of personality that the 90s ones gave us, but they are still cool little cars. So let's talk about this one then. Obviously it's a VGT, weirdly enough, and kind of expected, but it's definitely not outside the realms of possibility. It's essentially if you put a racing jacket on a K car. That is essentially what it is. You know, it's got the aero, it's got the looks, and there's a cool little thing I love about this car that isn't actually to do with the outside or the looks of it at all. It's actually to do with the interior. This is essentially a full-blown race car on the inside, although it does run on road tires, and it is just a absolute joy to look at. Trust me, if you've got VR, this is one of the cars that you don't want to ignore and you want to get in that VR because it looks absolutely incredible to look around. So let's talk a little bit about the performance. So in terms of the other K cars, this thing's absolutely smashing them on the horsepower front, putting out over 140 brake horsepower, which is pretty much double what the rest of them do put out. On average, you're talking around about 60 brake horsepower. Essentially, it takes away the engine regulations and allows it to go absolutely crazy, meaning that overall this does feel the fastest of the bunch, but I wouldn't necessarily class it as a typical K car, mainly because it's a a concept car. It's not a real thing. So you will see later on when I do make the full-blown K-car video that it isn't included. That's why I'm kind of doing it separately to kickstart the day before we talk about some of the, I guess, more classics and more, I guess, up-to-date K-cars. And I'll give you a rundown on the history, what it kind of means, and what the K-car actually is. And contrary to what a lot of people think, it's just a class of car made up by the Japanese government. But like I said, if you want to listen to that more in depth, then come along later on and I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about that. So what does the performance feel like when you throw regulations out of the window? And I would say it's actually very good. In terms of braking, it's got very, very decent brakes for what you'd expect. In terms of handling, those sports compound of tyres really do actually do a decent job. It feels insanely planted and stable. Now looking at this thing from the outside, you might think, oh god, a little gust of wind and that thing's going to roll over, but it certainly doesn't handle like that on the track. It really did feel very, very good around the Nordschleife, typically good through the more tight and twisty sections, which you will probably see. It really felt like it was kind of made for these tight and twisty sections, which is really kind of realistically where you'd expect these things to excel, and that is where it excels. In terms of the top speed, it hits a much higher top speed than any of the others, whereas usually you'll struggle to get anything near 100 miles per hour in the normal K cars. This thing just absolutely smashes it out of the park, and it really does feel like a full-blown race version. It feels like what it's meant to be. Now, I've just seen comments over the year or so that I've been doing YouTube, like nearly 18 months at this point, come to think of it, that really kind of slate this car as one of the more pointless cars. And in a way, yes, but if you do want a car for just driving pleasure, or you just want to experience something legitimately kind of stupid within GT7, then, well, look no further. Just trust me. I've driven this thing in VR many, many times. I've had a ton of fun with it. And again, I know there's a lot of players out there that just purely play VR to just experience all the different cars. And this is one that you really do want to jump on. So in terms of that aero, is it really doing anything for the car? And I would actually go on to say, yes, the aero does seem like it's actually functional. A lot of the K cars will kind of move about under braking, or you'll be finding yourself that it's just understeering and running itself wide. And this thing, well, it kind of counters that. It does feel like the aero on this thing is actually doing its job much better than you'd see with a lot of other cars actually. And so yeah, it does seem like it is more functional than it is purely just for looks and doing something a little bit stupid. So we've spoken about how quirky this car is, we've spoken about how the performance actually kind of makes sense relative to the type of car it is. However, there is a point that I know a lot of people are probably going to mention, and well, that's pricing of this thing. And well, you're not wrong. Let's just quickly touch on the price point of the Daihatsu Copen VGT RJ, whatever we want to call it. It comes in with the typical VGT price point of 1 million credits. And is that worth it for a car that's realistically not that usable? Yes, it's great in VR. Yes, it's quirky. Yes, it's something a bit different. But is 1 million credit price tag worth it? And in my honest opinion, I don't really want to say this, but no. No, it's not. Let's be honest. I kind of go by a rule of, can I make money back on the kind of car that I'm buying? If I say bought the likes of the Ford GT or whatever for 6 million credits, am I going to be able to make that back with that car? And well, the answer was yes. So okay, I bought that car, but now I'm in profit with it. The Daihatsu Copen's not really that usable. It's not really good at sort of grinding. It's realistically not that great really anyway, apart from the more small and twisty tracks. And if you was trying to grind money back with it, you're best better to be going into the slower races, which pay anywhere from 5,000 credits up to around about 25k, meaning that yes, you'll get a lot of mileage out of it, but you're going to kind of be doing the more easy and I guess more boring sprint races of the bunch. So in that way, I'd say no, 1 million credits is a little bit steep, but then it kind of makes sense in the fact that all VGTs are sort of priced around the 1 million credit mark. There's really nothing else to differentiate them in terms of price. So yeah, it's a little bit rough, but overall this is a great fun quirky car. So let's have a quick look where this thing actually stacked up on the lap time leaderboard. Now, funnily enough, this sits in the 500 pp category. As you can see, in terms of overall performance, it's actually the best ranked of the bunch that we've got on the screen here, which is rather quite funny considering it absolutely got smashed by the likes of a Carrera GTS 904, the Subaru Impreza and the Lancer. But again, they are four-wheel drive cars, and it does top the likes of the C1 and the Plymouth, which is rather quite obvious. So performance wise, it's not really there, but I always appreciate what a car is trying to do, and this essentially takes the K car regulations, throws them out of the window and says, look, this is what we can do if we're given the right resources, and regulations are out the window. Almost like the Porsche, when sort of Porsche left Le Mans and stuff, they then went, well, let's see what happens if we throw the regulations out the window. And well, that's essentially what the Copen represents. And for that, and for being quirky, for being so ridiculous, I massively appreciate this car. Now, don't forget, later on I will have my full coverage of all of the original K cars within GT7. I'll give you a talk about the history of K cars and how it kind of came about and what the kind of regulations kind of entail for the cars, and then I will talk and individually review all of the K car models. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check that video out later. Take care, guys. Have a fantastic day, weekend, whatever. Peace.